Hi, and welcome to Chapter 1. This week's Chapter 1 is Thanksgiving Treachery. Chapter 1. Tofurkey? Millie K., my mama harumphed. Who on earth ever heard alike? Her southern twang garnered a snicker from Darren Strickland. I glanced up from the list of activities I'd been curating, not as the Junction Journal's editor-in-chief, my newest title, but as Holiday Junction's secret merrymaker. Co-merrymaker, that was, with Darren. But it might as well have been singular. He'd had his nose stuck in those law books since he decided to go back to law school and start lawyering around here, leaving me with the task of doing the hundreds-of-year-old sacred job of deciding where the final hurrah of each holiday was going to take place in our little town. You told me I could invite friends who lived in the art district, I reminded Mama, getting a smile from Darren, but his eyes were still laser focused on the book in hand. And I quote, I lifted a finger and said in my best Millie K voice, now, Violet, I don't want anyone feeling left out of Friendsgiving. You go on and invite all them people up there in the mountain and ask them what they like to eat so they can enjoy a nice, friendly sit down. Mama brought the old rundown building of the recreation center and had a grand idea of turning it into what was called the Leisure Center. Technically, it was a senior citizens building with activities like bingo, line dancing, now knitting classes, thanks to Amelia, also as painting classes, again, thanks to Amelia, and among other things that many people our age would like. Now, Mama was too old, she said, but she was older than me, and she made her feel better that she actually was going to be doing activities and offering activities for people that were older than her. She's so Southern to her core that my friends truly made her an old soul, and with her traditions and personality. Like with most things Mama did, she brought the color into any situation here at Holiday Junction. I thought they'd like to eat turkey, stuffing, gravy, sweet potato casserole, buttermilk biscuit, cheesy grits, hash browns casserole, She sighed as she picked up the list of food Amelia Hartman had given me when I asked her to, and Mama shook it. Good food. Stick to your bones food. Stick to your ribs. Tofurkey. She wadded up the paper and stood up, tossing in the trash can as she walked out of the dining hall into the hallway. I've got a meeting with Mary Ann Drew this afternoon. She's trying to move that mistletoe masquerade ball and might rent the Leisure Center. Don't worry about the wadded up guest list, I called to Mama. I've got a copy, I said, smiling when she acted like she didn't hear me. She heard every single word I said, and no doubt she was off to find the fixins to make a tofurkey. But I was glad that she might get her first big rental out of Mary Ann Drew, a local woman I didn't know, but had already sent in information for me to do a big write-up in the Junction Journal over her mistletoe masquerade ball. Even though it was Thanksgiving, that was just a month away. I knew her by name, but not ever been face-to-face with her. In fact, I'd gotten another message last week from the desk of Mayor Paisley herself, asking if I could come to the last event of the Thanksgiving Festival, where they were going to honor Mary Ann Drew with a key to the village due to her generosity. She's right, Darren finally looked up, taking me out of my thoughts on how happy I was for Mama and what she had done with the Leisure Center. No matter how much Darren had his head stuck in his books, he surely didn't look the part of a lawyer with his wrinkled long-sleeve shirt, where the sleeves were haphazardly rolled up, and his long hair that hung down in the back. That doesn't sound very appetizing at all, he said, his dark eyes almost hidden by his thick brows. He smirked, knowing just what buttons to push with Mama. Oh, that's right, Mama agreed. Mama stuck out her tongue before she disappeared. You know what's not appetizing? I glanced across the large community table. The afternoon sun filtered through the skylights that were original to the old building. The sun was shining and very deceptive. If I were to walk outside right now, this Leisure Center, the weather would be much different. Autumn had rushed in Holiday Junction, what felt like overnight. Darren's comment about tofurkey still hung in the air as the amber light of the afternoon painted everything inside with warm hues. I couldn't help but gaze out of the leisure center windows, momentarily lost in the beauty of Holiday Junction during the season. Holiday Junction is something else during the fall, I mused aloud, picturing the village in my mind. The streets of our small village were lined with tall oak and maple trees, their leaves transforming into a tapestry of reds, oranges, and golds. It felt as though the mountains themselves caught fire in the autumn, their slopes of riot of colors contrasting beautifully with the serene blue of the sea on the other side. The countryside rolled out in stretches of harvested gold fields dotted with pumpkins and chrysanthemums. Farmers would set up stands selling fresh apple cider, and children would run around, their laughter echoing as they jumped into the heaps of the raked leaves. The scent of burning wood would drift from chimney to chimney, mingling with the ever present aroma of baked goods and roasting nuts. Local stores had already started their fall displays. Hand knitted scarves in seasonal color hung in Emily Treasure's window shop, and brewing beans had a sign of promising the return of their famous pumpkin spice latte. Even the lampposts were wrapped in strands of orange and yellow fairy lights, creating a soft glow that would soon combat the earlier sunsets. You know, I continued, turning back to Darren with a smile, as much as Mama huffs and puffs about changes, there's something inherently comforting about the traditions here. The decorations, the food, the colors, it's all butter to the soul. Darren chuckled, closing his law book for a moment. Agreed. And it's one of the reasons why I've never left Holiday Junction in the fall. There's nothing quite like it. I nodded. As editor in chief of the Junction Journal, I was fortunate to have a front row seat to all the village's stories. But it was during times like this, during the embrace of autumns, that I felt a deeper connection. Here, amidst the cozy traditions and the picturesque settings, there were stories that truly came alive. And as the leaves fell, it wrapped the village in a warm embrace. I couldn't help but feel grateful to be right in the middle of it all. It really is excited. It really is exciting that Mom's hosting Friendsgiving, I shrugged. Maybe it'll be the art district a little closer to the village. I'd only recently discovered the art district a few months ago, and it was literally its own community in the mountains. And from what I gathered and still investigating, has how these two communities always remained at odds with each other, even though they were in the same village. After I discovered the attitudes of locals, I took a vested interest in covering all the local government meetings as well as the Chamber of Commerce meetings, since they were the ones who made most of the business decisions about shops and future endeavors of Holiday Junction. Darren shifted from seat to a corner table. A waft of familiar smell drifted through the room. The aroma of pumpkin spice from brewing beans reached us, and I took in a deep breath, savoring the comfort scent. I'd only been at Holiday Junction a year, but that scent has quickly become synonymous with autumn, I remarked, thinking of how each year the scent seemed to weave deeper into my bones and my memories. We need to go down and see Hazel Lynn. She said everything was going fast, I said, talking about Hazel Lynn Hudson, owner and baker of Brewing Beans. Darren looked over at me with a smile, but it was tinged with something else. I noticed him inhaling deeply, a look of nostalgia passing over his face. You know, it reminds me of when I was a kid, he began, the distant gleam in his eyes showing was years away. Every fall, my mom would bring me home a fresh baked pumpkin pie and a steamy cup of pumpkin spice latte. The house would be filled with the aroma for days. I nodded, appreciating the sentiment, since I could see his mama, Louise Strickland, doing those things for their family. She and Marge Strickland owned the Junction Journal, and Marge was definitely not the mothering type Louise had been. There was something about this town and its tradition that could easily make anyone feel at home. But for those who grew up here, the connection ran deeper. Suddenly, Darren chuckled, drawing me in from his musing. Speaking of traditions, have I ever told you about the leaf dance? I shook my head, always eager to learn more about the intricacies of Holiday Junction. You should have seen it when we were kids, he said, his voice soft with remembrance. Every year, as a tree began to shed their leaves, the entire town would gather in Holiday Park near the fountain. Kids, adults, everyone would dance and play and kicking up the fall leaves, laughing and singing. The village would come alive with colors and stories from everybody, even the elders of the community. I try to picture the scene in my head, the square alive with children laughing, elders sharing their tales of yore, and the vibrancy of the autumn leaves swirling around as they did it. It sounded so magical. Darren's gaze became distant. Well, that was the essence of Holiday Junction, he continued. It wasn't just about the decorations or the food, he said. It was about the community coming together, sharing the joys and tradition passed down through generations. We need to do that, I gasped, looking around to make sure no one was around to hear. What? Darren snickered. As the you know whats, I whispered, my head cocked to the side and down to the ground so no one would hear me as I talked to him about our merrymaker duties. Oh, he said, smiling, a little glint in his eyes. That's a great idea. The sign can be like a huge leaf with other leaves dancing around it. He gestured with his hands in the air. He envisioned Vern McKenna making the sign that Darren and I would place to mark the end of the Thanksgiving festival. Help! Please, someone help! Our conversation was shattered by a blood-curdling scream, unmistakably Mama's. Darren and I exchanged a glance of alarm before racing out of the dining area, our feet pounding the tile floor. The echoing scream seemed to come out of the hall leading to the delivery entrance. We burst from the hallway to where the stairs of the delivery entrance was located, only to find a horrifying sight. Mama stood there, her face pale, her hands trembling as they covered her mouth. At her feet was Albert Hardston, the kind man who had delivered milk to Holiday Junction residents for as long as I could remember. His body was crumpled awkwardly at the bottom of the steps leading to the loading dock. From where I stood, it looked like a tragic accident, like he had slipped from descending the steps to his delivery truck. Oh, Albert, Mama sobbed, her voice quivering. I just came out to check on the delivery, and here he was. Darren moved quickly to Albert's side, checking for a pulse, while I took Mama into my arms, trying to soothe her racing heart. It's going to be okay, Mama, I whispered, though I wasn't for sure that myself. I took out my cell phone out of my pocket and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? The operator asked. Darren looked up at me, his expression grave. He's gone, Violet. A cold shiver ran down my spine. Chapter 1. Thanksgiving Church.